for anybody out there who doesn't already know what an assignment or a double closing is, just give a quick example here. So let's say if Luis found a motivated seller who was willing to sell their property for like $5,000, Luis can sign a purchase agreement with that person, locking in the sale price. He can then go and market the property for sale at, say, I don't know, $15,000. And he can do this before he even buys it from the original owner. And once somebody's interested in purchasing it at this $15,000 price, he can schedule the closing for both transactions to occur on the same day, making that $10,000 difference minus any closing fees between the original price and the final transaction. And one way to do this is with an assignment, and that's where you get the purchase agreement signed with some special language in it that allows you to sell that contract to somebody else so that they can then close on that transaction. And I think in a lot of ways, maybe that's a little bit cleaner because there's only one closing happening. But one of the downsides is that end buyer can see the original purchase agreement and the assignment agreement, which makes it very clear to them how much Luis is making in the transaction. Whereas with a double closing, there's literally one closing happening and then turn around and do another closing. And that buyer on the second closing doesn't see how much money the original property was sold for on that first closing. So Luis can kind of conceal how much money he's making in the deal. Doesn't have to give that away.
Before we go on, we'll go ahead and link into the show notes two different videos where I was a narration voice. I don't actually show up in the video because they're animated, but I have a pretty good explainer video on assignments and double closings that we'll link in the show notes.
Yep. And the show notes are at retipster.com/98, because this is episode 98.
What Seth said, it's pretty much what happens. When you have an assignment fee, depending on the state in which you're closing, the buyer and the seller will know how much you're making, even the seller. But in some states, only one party, one transaction, one person, or either the buyer or seller will know how much you're making. So what I do, I explain it to the buyer. I tell them everything. I tell them what I do. I send them emails with past deals. And I tell them, hey, I'm going to make this much. Are you okay with that? Most of the times they're okay because that's what I do. And on the double closing, that's right. You have two separate transactions. One in which I'm going to be the buyer. I own the property for a couple hours. The second one, I am the seller and I'm selling that to a new buyer. So those are two different transactions, and no one knows how much I'm making, who was the original seller. It's just very clean. If I'm making a higher profit than, I would say, like 7,500, I do a double closing. If I'm not making more than 7,500, or I'm in a state in which both parties have to know that I'm making a profit on the deal, I will do the double closing, because I do not want the seller to know that I'm making a profit on their land.
And who determines whether or not both parties have to know? Is this like a association of realtors or local government, or like, how do you find out what the rules are for your state?
That's a great question. What I do, I just call the title company.
Oh, okay.
That's how I get my information.
And are you always closing these types of deals, both assignments and double closings, with a title company, or do you ever self-close this kind of thing?
That's correct. Only with a title company when I double close or have an assignment fee.
Yeah, I'm a big advocate for closing with a title company as well. Luis, I want to backtrack a little bit before we move on. I want to kind of narrow in a little bit on what this conversation looks like with the end buyer, because this is the biggest reason why I've never pursued assignments or double closing in my land business, because in my head, maybe it's like the same thing that people who aren't familiar with real estate investing, they struggle with understanding why would anybody sell at such a deep discount in order to make the business work, but it happens. And maybe it's just like a limited belief or something weird on my end. But what does it like, can you walk us through what that conversation looks like? So you have an in buyer on the phone. They're saying, hey, I love the price. I want to move forward. How do you then explain, hey, by the way, I don't actually have title to this property? Like, what does that look like? Because that could be like a really awkward conversation.
That's an amazing question. Actually, it's awkward sometimes, but most of the times, people don't check the county's website, so they do not know that I'm not the owner, and I kind of don't tell them. What I do tell them is that I have a contract in place, and that contract can be sold to someone else, and that's what I do. I tell them that I'm the owner, I'm executing the contract, and I'm in the process of buying. And I explain to them that I'm a land investor, I flip land, and that's pretty much it. Actually, it's so simple.
Do you get a lot of pushback? Like, I mean, at first, are people like, because what I used to get a lot when I was trying to sell properties outside of using real estate agents, like when I was doing Facebook Marketplace and stuff like that, I'd get people questioning me all day long. How do I know you're not a scam? How do I know you're not just gonna like rip me off and take my money? And that was just with like a normal transaction. So when you add in the element of assignments, I'm like, how do you not get people questioning your every move?
What do I do? I just send them an email with past deals in which they have recorded deeds that they can see the proof. Also, I send them to my website, which has a lot of testimonials. And that's pretty much it. And if they don't want to do a deal, if they think I'm making too much money or whatever, I just go to the next.